Hello, role-playing people! And in this episode of the podcast, I will be replying to one of our listeners, Diego Salazar. Hello, Diego. I'm really glad you're enjoying this podcast and my small channel, and I hope you will keep coming back for more. You wanted to know how the Embrace Experiment game changed me and the players, what we learned from that game, and I will do my best to be brief about it, but we've learned a lot. Okay, it came at a time where most of our chronicles were experiments with the storyteller system, various settings, and what these elements afford us to do, what ideas and cool concepts we can orchestrate and bring to life. We were constantly trying new things at that time, keeping stories varied to the point where no two games really felt the same. They might have felt the same in the sense that I tried turning every single chronicle I ever ran into a sandbox, but that didn't really work out for me consistently until after the Mortals game. So I considered this one in particular a huge milestone for both myself and the group. How so? Well, until this game, everyone was playing more or less the same archetypes without much variation. They'd play mortals who were embraced young, they took to their own life, kind of like how Harry Potter took to being a wizard. No drama, just let's mess things up with our awesome disciplines and be awesome. What this meant is, even when attempting to go off the awesome path, they didn't have much success. The characters weren't complex, they didn't feel lifelike. Any drama the players tried bringing in felt very weird and made up. They were the type of protagonists who constantly wait for things to happen so they can react, and in Camarilla games, big things don't happen too often. In absence of strong character motivation and goals, the game becomes very boring very quick, unless me, as GM, would make the story happen and thus railroad my players into a story, which for me is no fun. It's no fun at all. I know a lot of people consider freedom of choice in RPGs an illusion, right? There are quite a few social norms in place, don't derail the game, that kind of stuff. So yes, the game is directed in order to work. Some restrictions apply. But my goal personally as storyteller has always been to allow genuine choice and to allow any character, as long as it's played right and played into the themes of the game, which I make very clear to all of my players. Ooh, ambulance. I don't want to run a PC or a console game. Right? I don't want to railroad, I don't want to prepare things from session to session and have the whole game like fall apart if I'm not prepared, right? I don't want the story to be just mine, and I don't want to deny my players anything. In order for that to work, I need mature and involved players whose protagonists can lead the game by knowing what they want to do, what motivations will fulfill these protagonists and make the experience fun. So, in the Mortals game, I really had no story, and I told them that there is no story but that which you make. I have NPCs, locations, hooks, a few mysteries to unveil, but no plot other than the fact that you will be embraced at some point. Now, because they were playing fictional versions of themselves, I think they tapped into a lot of personal motivations, and lo and behold, that was exactly the type of protagonists I needed for the game to work. People who do things. Rent a car, buy a car, make money, go on a date, find love, deal with loss, join an underground fight club, get into a street fight, get knocked out, spend time in the hospital recovering, and so on. It was probably the first game in which they understood that I don't want to just tell my story. That's boring. I want to bring to life their stories, and that is beautiful. Since I am mostly an improv storyteller, I don't really write dialogues and descriptions and so on. I just make sure I know my world and the NPCs in it, and then I just become those things. I bring them to life. This usually backfired in my face because in absence of motivation, the player characters just ran around doing silly stuff that doesn't matter, not contributing to the tone of the story, just outright breaking the tone of the story, and not really helping things move along, not really doing anything. But this time, they were packed to the brim with motivation and things they wanted to do, and they were so curious to see the world and the NPCs react to them, as opposed to them reacting to the world and the NPCs. So the game ran itself. All I had to do was play my NPCs, ask for roles, make sure my reactions are consistent with the setting and the tone of the game, and watch them tell me a beautiful, beautiful story about the struggle of some ordinary mortals somewhere. It was amazing. It was a blast. So the second thing that amazed us, and we really didn't think this would be the case, was that they didn't need superpowers. They didn't need builds, min-max, disciplines, none of that. Both players were so entranced by the fact that the game was authentic and mundane and hard that they just loved the fact that they didn't have superpowers, and this really encouraged them to think outside the box, not just run to your dominate, presence, and all of those social vampire disciplines that are super powerful. More so, the threat of violence in this game was really scary. A knife being pulled on a vampire in a dark alley somewhere is no issue. It's not scary, it's a chance to show how much of a badass your character is. But in a Mortals game, it's really scary. You can bleed out and die. You'll need medical care, which is expensive. Like, even if you survive, maybe you have some crippling affliction for the rest of your life. Any way you look at it, a physical, especially an armed confrontation, leads to nothing good for the protagonists. So that led to a new level of immersion and careful planning and horror, and ultimately, swallowing the character's ego and running away. In this game, they were not heroes, they were ordinary people, and we all loved that. Again, it did so much for the game. Third thing we learned is that it's okay to slow down. Not every session needs to be a whirlwind of action. Because of their inability to make and lead the story in previous vampire games, I always had to throw stuff at them, and that led to an issue of pacing. How can a tiny Camarilla town be attacked by a different villain every week? Come on, that's ridiculous. It breaks the whole setting. What is this, South Park? But hey, that's what happens when the players are not in character and they crave action, but demand to be entertained, right? They don't make any of it. So in this game, every word, every intimate scene, the way NPCs felt about them, everything just mattered. Because they were in character. They reacted to it. It felt important because it was. It was very important to our characters, who finally, instead of being cardboard cutout vampire wannabes, were complex, realistic individuals. Fourth thing, I think that's when I finally started using downtime appropriately. Because you can have a lot of action, even in a Camarilla game, but to make things consistent with the setting and keep a good pacing, you need to separate those bursts of action using moments of downtime. And proper use of this element adds so much authenticity and believability to the game. It's insane. I don't even know how I could ever run my games without downtime, but hey, I learned a lot and things are very smooth now as a result. Fifth thing, if people have fun at the table, their characters can even murder each other. It's going to be a blast. Character versus character is not the same as PvP. When my players were literally playing themselves, when one of them went the immoral Setite slave route and the other was a caring, moral family man, you'd think that would cause tension at the table, right? Because the characters aren't getting along, the party is divided. Well, not really. Maybe precisely because the characters were modeled after them, the players took the necessary distance from their protagonists. So everything that was happening in the game world, even when it was like, say, a very tense moment between the protagonists, a brawl, maybe it was dramatic, maybe it was really bad, the players were still smiling, enjoying the scene, having the time of their lives. So that was a very good show of how character versus character is definitely not the same thing as player versus player. Angry, upset characters, good, awesome. Angry, upset players, that's bad. The sixth thing we've learned is to communicate our intentions and expectations clearly. If a player wanted to do something I might not be prepared for, something I might have difficulty improving, then they'd tell me ahead of time, quick heads up, and I'd make sure to prepare something nice and fun for the session. Things like, I want to talk to X NPC. Yeah, that's all fine and dandy when improving, but to just spring it on me that you want your character to go to the other side of the continent on an awesome adventure with their family, yeah, that might put me in a bit of difficulty. So if they just let me know what they want to do and why it really matters to the character, sure, we can do whatever. Again, my goal as GM is to allow genuine choice and to tell a collective story, not just my story. So after a fun, very functional and very immersive sandbox experience, after the players couldn't even imagine the game ending, they were having so much fun, the characters were embraced. And all of a sudden, the flaws stacked against their motivations were so many, the flaws, the curses of being a vampire, that they couldn't go on. Vampirism had effectively crippled the protagonists to such a degree that the game had to stop. Mind you, the Sadite player was still on board to some extent, but the other player wasn't at all. So I didn't really see fit to continue this as a one-on-one. We just stopped there. So to sum up, my players learned that the more thought and work they put into the character, the more I will tell their story. And they will love it. They will enjoy the game on a whole new level of intensity. As a GM, I learned my approach to running games, though difficult, is not wrong by any means. It simply requires involved and mature players. It requires more collaboration, but that pays off a lot because everyone gets to play what they want, whether it's evil characters, aggressive characters, super flawed characters, all that stuff that scares most D&D GMs, right? I can allow it. I make it perfectly clear to the player that they are not being judged in any way. They can do whatever. But they are still responsible for everyone's fun, not just their own. So, do whatever, but careful with how you play and portray your evil character. Because everyone is here to tell a good story and have a good time. And I took the same approach with a recent Chicago by Night game I ran for like 3 years, I think, and I know for a fact at least one player would still love to pick up their character sheet and go at it again. Because this style of doing things is so rewarding for people who get involved and want to tell a story. It's crazy. And that makes me super happy because I always thought I was like a crap GM, but it turns out I just didn't have the right group. All right. I'll stop it here. Thank you for listening. I hope everyone enjoyed this, but most of all, I hope you are happy with the answer, Diego. And I'm really glad you invited me to talk more about that game. It certainly mattered a lot to my group all those years ago. All right. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.